work night shifts at a storage facility situated on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that remains unnoticed until its services are required. It's a low, unassuming compound nestled between the rear of a defunct strip mall and a drainage canal that emits a more pungent odor in the summer months. Most of the fluorescent lights either hum or flicker, and a few fail to illuminate altogether. The vending machine in the office accepts your money but withholds the soda unless you strike a particular spot on its side with the heel of your hand. My duties are straightforward. Lock the gate at 11:01 p.m., unlock it at 6:00 a.m., and walk the rows once or twice during the night to ensure no tweakers are illicitly occupying an unlocked unit. The cameras are mostly functional, and the alarms operate intermittently. Should anyone inquire, the consistent response is that no one is permitted on the premises after dark. I've had various co-workers come and go, teenagers, burnouts, parolees completing court-ordered employment. They cycle through quickly enough that I rarely recall their names. Management appears indifferent to who is on shift, so long as someone completes the logbooks and the property isn't incinerated. There's only one crucial rule here, and it's not codified in the handbook. Don't mess with Unit 103. An old padlock, substantial enough to deter a crowbar, secures its door. Records flag it as do not access. No one officially opens it, nor is it rented out. Yet, a payment arrives every month, always cash, always the exact amount with no return address on the envelope. Some months, the envelope is absent entirely, but it doesn't matter. The ledger is always updated, marked, paid in full. As far as I can discern, Unit 103 has been here longer than the current operating company, perhaps even longer than the building itself. The email arrived on a Monday night, one of those generic corporate blasts originating from a distant office. It mandated that all units must be accounted for by the end of the quarter, requiring visual confirmation, an inventory checklist, and photographic evidence, the typical bureaucratic box ticking to appease someone's spreadsheet. I scrolled through the list, already anticipating the answer before I posed the question. Nevertheless, I brought it up during our weekly call with the site manager. "What about 103? I asked. There was a pause, and then my manager's tone shifted subtly enough for me to notice. "Skip it. Don't log it. You don't want to mess with that paperwork. Just trust me." That was the extent of the discussion. Later, I mentioned it in the break room to a coworker whose name I hadn't bothered to learn, just casually chatting between rounds of walking the fence line. I half-jokingly brought up Unit 103. He stopped chewing his sandwich. "Don't even say the number out loud," he told me without laughter or further comment. He packed up his lunch and returned to sweeping an empty unit without another word. I started paying closer attention after that. Small details began to catch my eye. Locks on units that hadn't been opened in years appeared to have been recently handled. Scratches, new ones gouged into the old metal, appeared on 103's padlock. I knew no one, not even myself, possessed the keys. That's when curiosity truly began to take root. It was no longer a question of why, but rather a question of when. I would stop merely looking and start actively doing. On slow nights, with little else to occupy my time, I began sifting through old records. There wasn't much to be found. A few battered filing cabinets in the back office, crammed with faded contracts and receipts spanning decades. Most of it was routine. Late payments, auctions, unit transfers. But not 103. Unit 103 was listed in every set of records I could locate, including those predating the current building. I found paperwork dating back so far that the company name on the letterhead no longer existed. Handwritten leases were renewed repeatedly, with different names on the documents, none of which sounded genuine. LLCs dissolved 50 years ago, banks that folded in the 70s. Some of the signatures barely resembled handwriting at all. Jagged scrolls, symbols, loops, A few were signed in red ink that had bled through the pages beneath. One looked smeared, as if the ink hadn't been allowed to dry properly. Still, the payment never ceased. Every month, without fail, the ledger marked paid. No account overdue, no notices sent. Next, the hallway lights began failing, first flickering, then shorting out entirely. Maintenance visited twice, replacing the bulbs and checking the wiring. Both times, the lights failed again within a week. The rest of the building remained unaffected. I started losing track of time during my shifts, waking from what felt less like sleep and more like a trance, always standing in the same spot, halfway down the hallway, facing Unit 103. I couldn't say how long I'd been there. Minutes, hours, just staring at that dented metal door with its rusted padlock hanging loose on the latch. One night I knelt to examine the gap beneath it. I found something wedged there, dry, cracked pieces of something curled in on themselves. They were too small to be cloth, too fibrous to be bone, not exactly organic, but not quite anything else either. I flushed them down the break room toilet, thinking it was something that needed disposing of. But later I couldn't shake the feeling I should have kept them. Coworkers began complaining after that, scratching noises from inside 103, shuffling sounds, something knocking slow and steady from within. Management's response was flat. Rats, they said. Don't ask again. Management stopped responding to my questions. I stopped asking, not because I didn't want answers anymore, but because I wanted proof, something undeniable. I started observing 103 more closely. Every night, during my rounds, I checked the dust patterns across the concrete. The grime in this place settled thickly, but around a 103, it moved. Fine layers were swept into spirals. Smears stretched toward the door frame, as if something had dragged itself forward on hands or elbows. Footprints appeared where no one had walked, always leading to the door, never away. The smell worsened by the week. A sharp stink of mold or decay, something colder, like wet concrete left too long in standing water, or burnt metal, rust blooming under damp stone. It hung in the air even when the wind cut through the rows of units, heavier near 103 than anywhere else. One night, in the back of an old maintenance manual, I discovered a logbook I hadn't seen before. Torn pages, scribbled notes. Most of it was routine. Bulbs replaced, doors rehung, pest control visits. The final entry stopped me cold, written in shaky block letters across the last page. It's not what's in there, it's what it thinks it's keeping out. I waited for someone to intervene. A manager, an inspector, even another faceless corporate email reminding me not to ask questions. But no one came. No one seemed to care. However, I gained a new understanding, or at least a theory to work with. The rule wasn't about keeping us safe. It was about keeping it undisturbed, about leaving it unobserved. Containment through neglect. Watching it gave it shape. Thinking about it gave it weight. And now I'd been paying attention for far too long. Too late to go back to ignoring it. So I went about trying to fix it. One night, after locking the front gate and double-checking the cameras, I grabbed a pair of bolt cutters from the tool locker. I walked the rows as I always did, except this time I didn't stop at the end of the hallway. I went straight to 103. The padlock looked heavier than it was, old steel scabbed with rust. It gave way on the second squeeze. The metal snapped clean through, falling to the ground without a sound. I pulled the door open, slow, careful, expecting something worse than what I found. No body, no monster waiting in the dark. Not even the expected black void stretching off into nowhere. Just the storage unit, concrete walls, metal shelves bolted to the sides, coated in a thick layer of undisturbed dust. In the center, a chair, wooden, plain, set facing the back wall. Nothing sat in it. Nothing crouched behind it. No stains, no scratches. No signs of violence or ritual or anything else my imagination had been feeding me for weeks. I felt disappointed, even ashamed. All that paranoia for an empty room. When I tried to close the door again, it didn't fit the frame. The whole door frame had shifted, warped slightly outward, bent at the edges. Metal flexed out from the concrete. Simply put, it no longer closed all the way. I remember the door being airtight. This half-inch gap wasn't something I'd simply missed in my observations. Still, I had to close it. I jammed on the old lock and twisted it to appear untouched, knowing others avoided 103 on their shifts. It started slowly. A week after I opened 103, other units began unlocking themselves. Not kicked open, not broken into, just ajar. Barely noticeable unless you were paying attention. A door hanging an inch off the latch. A padlock dangling loose, though it had been secure the night before. Inside, things didn't make sense. TVs left behind were still warm to the touch. Standing lights blinked in dark rooms with no power connection. Fridges hummed quietly. Lights flickering behind cracked doors. Food sitting on tables, untouched but far too fresh for how long these units had been sealed. Each one felt paused, suspended in the exact moment their owner stepped away. Time behaved strangely when I stood in them. Watches ticked slowly. Phones refused to keep signal. I reported it, of course. Logged everything. Photos, serial numbers, detailed notes on the oddities. Management responded with the same tone they used for 103. Forced calm. Thin smiles, tight voices. The unit shift sometimes, they said. Locks fail. These things happen. When I pressed them, asking why none of this was in the manuals and why there wasn't a protocol, they only grew quieter. Reassurances fell flat. Stick to the rounds. Keep your head down. They sent a guy from maintenance to relock the doors. He worked without comment, without hesitation, locked everything up, and left with a nod as though this was routine, as though this was exactly what he had been hired to do. Although he never saw that Unit 103 was actually unlocked, presumably by instruction from management, he avoided it. The message was clear. Ignore it. Leave it alone. And it stays manageable. Poke it, and things get worse. That was the rule. Ignorance kept it docile. Attention made it restless. But that was the problem. I couldn't unsee what I had started. I couldn't unthink it. I had let something stretch, and now it was pulling at the seams of the whole place. I'd been curious. I had gone too far. Still, I told myself I could fix it. I could put it back the way it was. Seal 1-3, relock the others, return the building to its quiet, decaying routine. I thought, maybe if I moved fast enough and showed I understood the job now, it would let me. That was the only plan left. Fix it. Put everything back in its place. When alone, I went back to 103 with a new lock in hand. Heavier this time, industrial grade. I drilled fresh holes, set new brackets, and reinforced the frame where it had warped. When I cinched the lock shut, it felt solid, secure. By the next night, it had bent itself open again, the metal twisted outward at the edges, straining against bolts I knew I had driven cleanly. Nothing dramatic, no noise, no spectacle, just quiet pressure until the steel gave way. I tried again. Different lock, a different bracket, more reinforcement, the same result. The door refused to stay closed. Management knew. I didn't even need to tell them. They called me into the office at the end of my shift. No warning, no explanation, just the text from the manager's personal phone. Come to the office. Bring your keys. The lights were already off when I got there. Only the hallway bulbs still burned, buzzing faintly against the silence. I half expected the door to be locked, half expected to find nobody waiting for me at all. But the door swung open as I approached. Inside, the manager sat behind the desk, hands folded over a manila folder that bore no label. He didn't gesture for me to sit, didn't offer a drink, just watched me come in and close the door behind me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Do you know why you're here? He asked at last, his voice quiet, measured. I shook my head. I kept my hands on my keys. Part of me wondered if this was the end of the line, if I had looked too closely, pried too far, if they were going to walk me down to 103, unlock the door, and shut it behind me. I imagine you think you've been clever, he said, breaking into 103, trying to fix what you don't understand. He opened the folder. Inside were papers I didn't recognize. My employee file, maybe a list of incidents, security logs, photos of me on my rounds, standing too long outside wrong doors, opening the wrong locks. We warn people for a reason, the manager said. That unit stays closed because ignoring it keeps it quiet, like a dog that forgets to bark if no one is around. Attention stirs it up. Curiosity wakes it. Obsession makes it stretch. He closed the folder with a soft tap of his fingers. Most people can't help themselves. They leave eventually or they're removed. You lasted longer. You showed patience. You followed the pattern. You didn't just break the rules. You tested them. I felt my throat dry out. So, what happens now? He smiled, not cruelly, almost kindly. Think of it as a promotion. He pushed a new set of keys across the desk toward me. Not just for the gates, not just for the office. A ring of keys I didn't recognize. Keys that had weight to them. Keys that belonged to things I hadn't seen yet. This place needs a caretaker. People who understand the rhythm of things. People willing to watch the locks and turn them when they stop holding. It's not an easy job. It's not always clear what you're keeping out or what you're keeping in. He leaned back in the chair, still watching me with that calm, unreadable expression. The manager slid the folder closer to me with one finger nodding for me to open it. Inside wasn't just my employee file. There were other names, other dates, a list of people who had come before me. Some I recognized from the old maintenance logs I'd found buried in storage. Each entry ended the same way. Reassigned containment oversight. No resignation dates, no severance details. Just that flat final note. You're not just getting a promotion, the manager said. You're inheriting something. A responsibility that doesn't end. Not until it passes on again. He stood, stretched slowly, tired bones cracking in his shoulders. In the dim light, he leaned towards me. I got a better look at his face. He looked young but wore old features. Age eroded on him in layers. This building doesn't exist to store furniture or paperwork or people's junk. It exists to hold things in. 3 isn't special. It's just the oldest. The others are newer, less settled. But they all need attention. They all need caretakers who know which doors to leave alone and which ones to lock twice. I looked down at the folder. Some units had been reclassified over time. The numbers changed. The location shifted, but the patterns were there. Always a handful, growing restless at once. Always the same kind of person brought in to notice, to intervene. If no one does the job, the doors won't stay closed, he said. When one opens, the others follow. You saw it yourself. You started the chain. You're the only one who can put it back the way it was. I asked the question hanging at the back of my throat. What if I leave? He smiled small. I couldn't tell if it was pity or amusement. People don't leave. They either lock the doors or join what's behind them. He picked up the folder again, tapped it twice against the desk, like closing the lid on a box. You've lasted longer than most. That tells us you understand, or you will soon enough. He showed me to the door. The hallway stretched out ahead, quiet as ever, the keys heavy in my hand. Too late to pretend I hadn't earned them. I walked the facility alone that night, the new keys cold in my hand. The rows of units stretched out under dead fluorescent lights, the air hanging heavy with a faint scent of dust and damp concrete. I thought at first it was my imagination, the way my breath fogged in the air, even though the night wasn't cold enough for it. But the further I walked, the colder it felt. The stillness wasn't right. Doors hung open where they shouldn't. Not wide, not broken. Just ajar, a fraction of an inch here, a full handspan there. Locks dangling loose, some fallen to the ground without a sound. Lights flickered behind those doors. Televisions burst faintly in empty rooms. Something inside breathed in time with my footsteps, slow and deliberate, though nothing moved in the spaces beyond the thresholds. No shapes waited in the dark. No faces pressed into the cracks, just open doors waiting. I understood. It wasn't about monsters hiding inside. It was about the act itself. Doors opened too long invited attention. Left unchecked, they invited worse. If I didn't close them, someone else would pay the price for my hesitation. So, I went to work. One by one I closed them, checked the seals, turned the locks using the new keys until they clicked shut. I logged each one in the ledger with slow, steady handwriting. Lock, ledger, lock, ledger. No answers waited for me. No final reveal of what I'd been keeping in, or what might one day slip free. Just a cold repetition of the task I'd inherited. A rhythm as old as the building itself. Lock, ledger, move on to the next. Years went by without me noticing. Or maybe noticing didn't matter anymore. As soon as I was proficient at the job, my manager disappeared. He just stopped showing up to work. I saw a letter from upper management simply stating that I was the new acting manager. The job never changed, but I did. My bones ache in ways they shouldn't. Eyes are slow to adjust, joints stiff. Some mornings I sit too long in the chair at the desk, staring at the logbook, unsure whether I had finished the shift or was about to start one. They tell me it was stress or lack of sleep. Maybe I'd believe that if I wasn't still young enough to know better. I watched the new hires come and go. Most treated this place as a pit stop. A few months of easy nights, just enough money to bridge the gap to something better. They talked about future plans, schools, promotions, travel, anything else. Some lasted less than a week. The long hallways got to them, the way sound carried when it shouldn't, the way certain doors seemed to breathe if you stood too close. They all left in the end. They always do. Somewhere along the way I started slipping, missing things. Locks were undone for longer than they should have been. Units shifting without my notice. I'd double back on rounds and find doors open behind me. Though I just walked past, I told myself it was age catching up. That made it easier to explain. Easier than admitting this place was draining me, pulling something from me a little more each year. Then came the new hire. Young, quiet, observant in a way that made me wary. I caught them lingering too long in front of 103, asking the wrong questions, running their fingertips along the locks like they were looking for something hidden beneath the rust. I recognized the look. I remembered wearing it. One night as they clocked in, I handed them the round sheet, as casual as I could manage. Don't bother with 103, I told them. Trust me, just keep the doors locked. That's the job. They nodded, said they understood. But I knew better. I'd said the same thing once and still found myself standing with bolt cutters in my hands, staring at a door that would not stay shut. Now I wait to see if they'll listen, or if they'll open it. Wait to see if they'll end up in this chair with my keys on their belt, wondering when the ache started and why the clock ticks so slowly here. Hopefully, maybe someone else can take this from me, that I can finally leave, whatever leaving means. But I wonder what happens to me when that day comes, where I'll go, or if there's a door somewhere waiting for me too.